The color of your skin didn't just happen. It's the result of one of the longest, strangest, and most dramatic transformations in the history of life on Earth. And the most fascinating thing is that it wasn't an accident, nor a cosmic roll of the dice. It was a story of survival, a slow-motion biological negotiation between your ancestors and the sun. And the sun, to be fair, wasn't playing fair. But what happened? The answer involves vitamin D, cancer, folate, Africa, ice ages, ancient farmers who accidentally rewired their own evolution, and a surprisingly rude star 93 million miles away that caused all of it and has no regrets. If you trace the human family tree back to its deepest roots, every single one of your ancestors, regardless of where you stand today, had dark skin. Not most, but all of them. About 300,000 years ago, when Homo sapiens first emerged in Africa, the entire species had dark skin. There were no pale people, no light-skinned populations anywhere on the planet. The concept of light skin didn't even exist among humans. Think about that for a second. Every person you've ever seen in a history book, every ancient civilization, every mythology, every cave painting, all trace back to a single founding population that looked nothing like a significant portion of modern humankind. That means at some point in history, something happened. Something changed. And that change was so powerful, so deeply rooted in our DNA, that it reshaped the physical appearance of entire populations across multiple continents over tens of thousands of years. So, what was it? Well, before we get to that, we need to understand something about skin itself. Most people have no idea what skin actually is or what it's doing for you right this second. Many treat skin as if it's just packaging, like the bag your body came in, the wrapper that holds your organs together while you argue with strangers on the internet. But skin is an organ, your largest organ in fact, and it's performing about 47 different tasks simultaneously, most of which you never think about and never thank it for. One of those tasks, perhaps one of the most important, is protection from UV radiation. UV radiation is the invisible energy the sun blasts at Earth constantly and relentlessly. And it is not your friend. UV light breaks chemical bonds. It damages DNA. It causes mutations in your cells. And if those mutations accumulate in the wrong places over time, they turn into cancer, specifically melanoma, one of the most aggressive forms of skin cancer out there. This is where skin color becomes relevant. The pigment that gives skin its color is called melanin. And melanin is, in the most literal biological sense, a sunscreen, a natural, built-in, always-on UV filter. The more melanin your skin contains, the darker it appears, and the more effectively it blocks UV radiation from penetrating into the deeper layers of tissue where your DNA lives. Dark skin isn't just a look, it's a shield. This is why in Africa, where our species originated, directly under some of the most intense UV radiation on the planet, evolution rapidly and strongly selected for dark skin. Having more melanin meant your DNA was better protected. It meant you were less likely to accumulate cancer causing mutations. It meant you lived longer, stayed healthier, and most importantly, from evolution's cold, calculating perspective, had a better chance of surviving long enough to reproduce and pass your genes on to the next generation. Natural selection is basically a very slow, very relentless optimization algorithm. It doesn't care about aesthetics. It has no opinions on beauty. It doesn't wake up in the morning with a vision for what the human species should look like. It runs one calculation over and over again, billions of times, across billions of organisms. Does this trait help you survive long enough to have offspring? If yes, keep it. If no, eliminate it. In equatorial Africa, under that scorching sun, dark skin was an emphatic yes. Every generation, every time. But here's the kicker, and this is where the story gets genuinely unexpectedly complicated. UV radiation doesn't just attack your skin cells, it also attacks something inside your body. something small, invisible, and critically important. Something that, if you destroy it in the wrong person at the wrong time, can end a pregnancy before it even really gets started. The molecule in question is called folate. It's a form of vitamin B9, and it flows through your bloodstream performing essential biological maintenance jobs. You might be thinking, okay, vitamin B sounds like something my doctor told me to eat more of. Why does that matter for skin color? It matters enormously, especially if you're pregnant or trying to get pregnant. Folate is critical for neural tube development in embryos. The neural tube is the structure that eventually becomes the brain and spinal cord. Without enough folate in the very early weeks of pregnancy, sometimes before a woman even knows she's pregnant, the neural tube may not close properly. The consequences are catastrophic. Neural tube defects, severe developmental abnormalities, miscarriage. Now, here's the rub. UV radiation destroys folate. When UV light penetrates the skin and hits the bloodstream, it breaks down folate molecules. And in a sunny environment like equatorial Africa, without clothes, without shelter, without sunscreen, UV exposure was constant, intense, and unavoidable. This created an additional devastating selective pressure. Pregnant women with lighter skin, less melanin, more UV penetrating deeper, had higher rates of folate destruction. Higher rates of folate destruction meant higher rates of neural tube defects. Higher rates of neural tube defects meant fewer surviving offspring. So, now we have not one, but two completely independent reasons why dark skin was deeply, powerfully, and non-negotiably favored under the African sun. First, melanin protected DNA from UV damage, reducing cancer risk. Second, melanin protected folate in pregnant women, preserving reproductive success. Two separate threats, one biological solution. Dark skin in Africa wasn't just helpful, it was essentially mandatory for the species' survival. Okay, so dark skin is this multifunctional biological superweapon. It blocks cancer. It protects folate. It's been field-tested and optimized over hundreds of thousands of years. If evolution had a rating system, dark skin would have a 5-star rating with thousands of glowing testimonials. So, why, in the name of all that is logical, did it change? Why did populations that left Africa end up getting lighter and lighter over thousands of years? The answer is one of the most elegant and brutal trade-offs in all of evolutionary biology. Between approximately 70,000 and 100,000 years ago, groups of Homo sapiens began to leave Africa. It wasn't a single dramatic event. No one called a meeting. No one announced a grand migration. It was a slow, gradual generational drift. One group moves a little further than their parents. Their children move a little further still. Over thousands of years, humans spread across the Middle East, into Europe, across Asia, and eventually into the Americas. And as they moved north, something fundamental about their environment changed. The sun got weaker. Not the sun itself. The sun remained exactly as indifferent and nuclear as ever. But at higher latitudes, sunlight hits the Earth at a lower angle. It passes through more atmosphere before it reaches you. UV radiation is filtered out. Days are shorter. Winters are long and dark. Skies are overcast for months. In Northern Europe, in Northern Asia, in Canada, the UV environment is radically different from equatorial Africa. Instead of intensely relentless radiation you need to block, you have weak, intermittent radiation you desperately need to absorb. And suddenly, the dark skin that was perfect in Africa became a problem. Not because of cancer. Cancer risk in northern latitudes with weak UV was much lower. Not because of folate. Less UV meant less folate destruction. So, that was fine. No, the problem was something else. Something that doesn't get enough credit in this story. Vitamin D. Vitamin D is synthesized in the skin when UV radiation hits a compound called 7-dehydrocholesterol. Your skin is literally a solar panel. It uses sunlight as an energy source to manufacture this essential molecule. And vitamin D is not optional. Not at all. It is absolutely fundamental to human health. Vitamin D regulates calcium and phosphorus absorption in the gut. Without it, calcium isn't absorbed properly, no matter how much dairy you consume. Without calcium, bones don't mineralize correctly. In children, severe vitamin D deficiency causes rickets, a disease that softens and deforms bones, bows legs outwards, causes the skull to flatten, and stunts growth. In adult women, vitamin D deficiency can cause a condition called osteomalacia, which softens the pelvic bones. And softer, deformed pelvic bones make childbirth extraordinarily dangerous, sometimes impossible. Women with severe vitamin D deficiency had dramatically higher rates of death during childbirth. But vitamin D deficiency doesn't stop at the skeleton. It also impairs immune function, making you more susceptible to infections. It affects muscle strength. It influences cardiovascular health. Some research links chronic deficiency to depression and cognitive decline. Vitamin D does so much biological work that when you run out of it, the body starts to fail across multiple systems simultaneously. Now, put a dark-skinned person in Northern Europe 40,000 years ago. They have highly efficient melanin. Their skin blocks UV radiation beautifully, which is brilliant in Africa. But in the gray, cloudy, low-light north, that same melanin is now blocking the very UV they need to synthesize vitamin D. Their skin can't differentiate between the dangerous UV it should block and the helpful UV they desperately need. It just blocks. So, they don't make enough vitamin D. Their calcium absorption plummets, their bones weaken, their children develop rickets, women die in childbirth, the population starts to dwindle. Dark skin in northern latitudes wasn't just a disadvantage. In a pre-industrial world with no supplements, no fortified foods, no medical interventions, it was a multi-generational extended death sentence. And evolution, that cold, ruthless, infinitely patient calculator, started selecting against it. Mutations that reduced melanin production started appearing randomly in the population, as mutations always do. But instead of being weeded out, they spread because individuals with slightly lighter skin synthesized slightly more vitamin D, had slightly healthier bones, had slightly higher reproductive success, generation after generation, a little lighter, a little lighter, a little lighter. Over thousands of years, the average skin tone of northern populations crept up. Not because anyone decided it should, not because of culture or preference or social forces, but because in that specific environment, at that specific latitude, with that specific amount of sunlight, lighter skin kept more people alive. The algorithm simply flipped its inputs. For a long time, scientists assumed that the depigmentation of European populations happened gradually over hundreds of thousands of years. A slow, steady evolutionary drift as people moved north. Recent ancient DNA analysis has completely demolished that assumption and replaced it with something far more interesting. The earliest European hunter-gatherers, the people who lived in Europe for tens of thousands of years after the initial out-of-Africa migration, still had significantly dark skin. Even after living in northern latitudes for a very long time, they hadn't dramatically depigmented. The most famous example is a specimen known as Cheddar Man. He lived in what is now Great Britain approximately 10,000 years ago. Ancient DNA analysis published in 2018 revealed he likely had dark to medium dark skin, dark curly hair, and blue eyes. A combination that seems almost paradoxical to modern eyes because we associate blue eyes with very pale skin. But 10,000 years ago, That wasn't yet the case. The extremely light skin we associate with Northwestern Europeans today, the kind that burns in about 12 minutes of summer sun, appears to have become widespread in European populations only in the last 6,000 to 8,000 years. That is shockingly recent. In the 300,000-year history of Homo sapiens, that's less than 3%. So, what happened 6 to 8,000 years ago that suddenly accelerated this process so dramatically? The answer is one of the biggest transitions in human history, and almost no one talks about its effect on skin color. The Neolithic Revolution. The shift from hunting and gathering to agriculture. When humans transitioned to farming, their diet changed completely and permanently. Hunter-gatherers ate a varied diet that naturally included significant amounts of vitamin D, fatty fish like salmon and mackerel, organ meats like liver and kidney, shellfish, and other animal products that are among the richest dietary sources of vitamin D available. Agricultural populations ate primarily grains, wheat, barley, oats, rye, carbohydrates. Their dietary intake of vitamin D didn't just drop, it plummeted. Suddenly, populations that had been getting by with modest amounts of synthesized vitamin D because their diet also contributed, were now almost entirely reliant on what their skin could produce. And if their skin was still quite dark, that wasn't enough. The selective pressure for lighter skin dramatically intensified. Even small increases in vitamin D synthesis capability, even marginally less melanin, became critically important for survival. But there's a second factor that made this shift happen faster. Agricultural communities were large. They were dense. They were sedentary. And population size and density have enormous effects on how quickly an advantageous mutation can spread through a gene pool. In a small, dispersed hunter-gatherer band of 50 people, a beneficial mutation might take a very long time to reach even neighboring groups. In an agricultural village of hundreds, connected to a network of other agricultural villages, a beneficial mutation can spread through thousands of descendants in just a few generations. The combination of the collapse of dietary vitamin D plus population density essentially hit the fast-forward button on European depigmentation. In just a few thousand years, the selective pressure that had been subtly lightening skin tones for tens of millennia suddenly became intense, rapid, and visible in the archaeological record. Here's something that genuinely surprises most people when they first hear it. Skin color is not controlled by a single gene. There isn't a dark skin gene and a light skin gene where one dominates the other. It's far more complicated than that. Skin pigmentation is a polygenic trait. It's controlled by dozens of different genes working together, genes that influence how much melanin is produced, what type of melanin is produced, how melanin granules are distributed within skin cells, and how skin responds to UV exposure over time. And here's what makes this truly remarkable. Different populations that independently evolved to have lighter skin didn't use the same genes to do it. East Asians and Europeans both have significantly lighter skin than equatorial Africans. But the genetic variants responsible for lighter skin in East Asians are largely different from the variants responsible in Europeans. They arrived at similar outcomes via different molecular routes. This is called convergent evolution. The same adaptive solution, lighter skin in low-UV environments, independently discovered through completely different genetic pathways by separate populations on separate continents. Think about what that means. The evolutionary pressure was so strong, so consistent, so unambiguous that natural selection found the same answer multiple times. Not once, not twice, multiple times. Independently. When evolution keeps reinventing something from scratch, that's the strongest signal biology can give you that the trait in question really matters for survival. While we're in the genetic neighborhood, let's talk about something adjacent that's equally mind-blowing. Blue eyes. Every single person alive today with blue eyes, every single one, no exceptions, descends from one specific individual. One person, one mutation, one moment somewhere in the Black Sea region, approximately 6,000 to 10,000 years ago. Before that individual was born, the entire human species had brown eyes. All brown, brown. Nothing but brown, however far back you go. Then this mutation appeared, a change that reduced melanin production specifically in the iris. And it spread slowly at first, then faster, because it was likely genetically linked to skin pigmentation variants that were under strong selection. Now consider something as seemingly ancient and fundamental as blue eyes. Something that has been used to categorize humans into categories throughout history is younger than the invention of agriculture. It's younger than Stonehenge. It's younger than the domestication of the horse. We treat certain human characteristics as ancient and primordial when, in geological or even historical terms, they're basically brand new. The version of humanity we consider normal and fixed is still being written. Let's step back and look at the full picture. Skin color. The thing that has defined so much of human history, shaped political systems, justified atrocities, divided and categorized people into hierarchies for millennia. It is, at its biological core, a UV calibration system. It's a dial, an adjustment mechanism. Your body's best ancestral estimate of how much sun protection you need, given the latitude your distant ancestors happen to inhabit, the diet they happen to eat, and the sun they happen to live under. Light skin isn't better in any absolute sense. In equatorial environments, it's actively dangerous. More UV penetration, more DNA damage, more cancer risk, more folate destruction. Light skin in Africa is a survival disadvantage. Dark skin isn't less evolved or primitive. It's the ancestral state, the original setting, the baseline from which everything else is a modification. If anything, lighter skin is the newer version, the adaptation, the variation. Dark skin is the default. And the deepest irony of all is this. The same sun that drove some populations to develop more melanin to survive its power also drove other populations to develop less melanin because they needed more of its limited energy. The sun didn't pick sides. The sun didn't have preferences. The sun just radiated indifferently and let evolution sort out the rest. We built an entire civilization of prejudice, oppression, and hierarchy around a vitamin D problem, a calcium absorption issue, a folate protection mechanism. Human populations are still evolving, slowly, almost imperceptibly on any individual timescale, but evolving nonetheless. The selective pressures that shaped skin color are still present in the environment, even if modern technology has partially muffled them. We have vitamin D supplements now. We have sunscreen. We have fortified foods and electric lighting and heated homes and year-round access to food from every latitude on Earth. We've built a civilization that partially decouples skin biology from its original function. The evolutionary algorithm is still running, but we've changed the inputs. What that means for the human species in the next 100,000 years, no one can say. Evolution doesn't send out newsletters. But what we can say with full confidence is that every human skin tone that exists today is a product of the same ancient population. Standing under the African sun, slowly spreading across an unpredictable planet, and carrying, written in melanin, the precise record of every environment their descendants passed through. Every skin tone is an answer to a question asked by a star.